Well, aren't you glad that you heard the shepherd's call when you were lost? And that's a good missionary song, isn't it? It's great to be back in Frankfurt. Every time I walk into this place, all these memories come back, not all of them good. I've known some of you for 36 years. Can you imagine? And some of you don't really look any worse than you did back then. So it is great to be here, talk about what God is doing in some faraway places. And let me push my button here. You've got a great crew back there. All right. I want to start with 3 questions tonight, and they're all ones that might seem like they have obvious answers. What's the purpose of missions? Somebody tell me. Make disciples. That's good. What else? Somebody want to add to that?
See souls saved.
See souls saved. Anybody else?
Plant the seed of salvation.
All right. Is the work of missions ever done in a place? The third question, does Frankfurt need missionaries?
Yes. Amen.
Okay. Well, I told you the answers seem obvious, at least, but I want to give you different answers to those questions. If we talk about the purpose of missions, if we look at the example of Paul, and he said his ministry was to preach the gospel in places where it had not been preached. And so if we make the task of missions specific, it's not just any Christian sharing the gospel with anybody, but it's especially somebody who goes somewhere, usually a distance, to take the gospel to people who might not otherwise have heard it. That's really kind of what we think of as missions. It's going on a mission to a place. And the Apostle Paul said even that, if you look at this verse, let me back up one, where he said, having no place in these parts, what did he mean? He had run out of things to do. Now, how is that possible? Had everybody gotten saved? No. Had everybody even heard the gospel? Probably not. But his mission was to take the gospel to people who have not heard, and he was having to go farther to do that. And by the way, the book of Romans is a missionary fundraising newsletter. Did you know that? He wrote to them to explain the gospel that he preached, and how he was specially called to the Gentiles, and why they should give him an offering when he would come by there on his way to Spain. So it's a missionary fundraising newsletter. I bet you didn't know there was one of those in the New Testament, right? But of course it's important to us for a lot of reasons besides that. And so he was telling them he was gonna have to make this trip. And so is the job of missions ever done? Not if it's evangelism, but if it's to plant the gospel in a place so it can spread, then that job can be done in each location. And as he traveled around, he established the church in every place, appointed leaders who many times had not been saved very long themselves. So let's look at those questions. Can missions be done in a place? It can, in the sense of planting the church so that it will continue the job of evangelism. Does Frankfurt need missionaries? I'm going to say no, because mission work has already been finished in Frankfurt, and you're here now. The church is here. Think about that. Would you really need a missionary to come from somewhere, to come in here and go up and down these streets and share the gospel? Would that make sense when you're here? Missions is not the job of evangelizing every individual. That's the job of the church. That's on you now. So think about that. We'd all love for missionaries to do it all, but missionaries just can't get to everybody. And so they plant the church, and then the church is supposed to finish the job. Amen? Missionaries are on a mission. You know, the first purpose that every one of us has is to love God, serve God, and then be a blessing to our neighbors and share the gospel as God helps us to do that. But that's just being a Christian. We're all supposed to do that. And so when we send a missionary around the world, we don't just send them over there to be a Christian. They're a Christian on a mission. They're there to get something going, right? They're there to get something started. And so we like to get a newsletter back saying, I shared the gospel with my neighbor Pierre and he prayed and got saved. Well, that's great. But what we like to hear even more is, I prayed with Pierre and he got saved and now he's having a Bible study in his house. Because that's something happening beyond the direct effort of the missionary. Something has started there. And that's really, we have to have that kind of goal with missions. Amen? Missionary work is by nature somewhat temporary. They're not going to be there forever. And so it's really important that they establish something that will continue until Jesus comes back. That makes local training really important. And so we think of the work of missions as evangelism, and it is, because you can't form a church out of unsaved people. You got to get some people saved. But about the time the first person gets saved, training starts becoming really important, because you need to disciple, and you're always watching for those people who have some potential and some interest and some zeal, and you think, how can I invest and help them to be able to do something here? Amen? And that's the job of the missionary, to be thinking that way all the time. Jesus, of course, set the example, spending a lot of time with a small group, because his work on the earth physically was temporary. And so local training is really important. Paul said to Timothy, the things that you have heard of me among many witnesses, the same commit thou to faithful men who will be able to teach others also. And so not just discipling people to be Christians, and so they can disciple others to be Christians, but training people to be more effective in what they're doing so they can train others to be more effective. Someone has said Paul was looking for fat men, faithful, available, and trainable, F-A-T. Now, if you're fat in another way too, that's okay. But it's really good to be fat in that way, faithful, available, and trainable. And so we look for those people. And I believe that God gives people in the local church teaching ability. It doesn't have to be a college professor. It doesn't have to be a seminar teacher. We don't have to, everybody doesn't have to go off to Bible college to get something. It really needs to be done on a local basis. Now, in the U.S., of course, we have so much available. We're all linked up. Today on my little phone, as I was sitting at the place we went for dinner over at the pastor's house, in the few minutes that I was sitting there, I had a message from Liberia and Kyrgyzstan and Haiti as I was sitting there in the recliner waiting for the pork chops to be served up. We're just so connected. And in America, of course, we have so much available. And so even if a pastor doesn't go to Bible college, all kinds of things are available. It's not that way everywhere. And so there are many people that grew up under a pastor that might not even have known how to read. Can you imagine that? And he might have grown up under a pastor that didn't even know how to read. So this local training is not happening unless something is given to them to work with. And so if you read our paper, we talk about Shepherd's Global Classroom all the time, because most ministry is communication. Most of the time, whether it's preaching or teaching or even praying together or counseling or encouraging, prayer requests, praying together, all of that is basically telling somebody something. Do you ever notice that? If you're in ministry, you're a professional talker. That's what you do. You talk all the time. That's your job. And hopefully you have something worth saying. But because of that, this communication is because we think that there are things that people need to know, right? That's why ministry exists, and why it's telling somebody something. There are things people need to know. And so we go all over the world. And of course, the gospel is that central truth, but then there are other things that we follow up with that. And that's the reason for Shepherd's Global Classroom. It's to put in the hands of people who can teach, that God has gifted in that local church something to use. And I do have a table back there with a bunch of them. Those are just displays. We don't sell them on Sunday. But shepherdsglobalclassroom.org has all of those. And they are back there for you to look at if you're interested. And so let's talk about what is happening in some different parts of the world. And these languages are not all HPM projects, but the courses are going into all of these languages. And some of them are HPM, some of them are EFM, some of them are Bible Methodist, some of them are HIM, but different missions, depending on where they are mainly working in the world, they're taking on some of these languages. And then some of the other missions, they use the same languages too. So we're working together, and God is really helping us. And I'm going to tell you a little more about what is happening with that in some specific places. So let's talk about Haiti a little bit. Haiti is where we have been working as an organization for over 50 years. And Haiti is known especially for its poverty, and it's a country where people live without many of the things that we take for granted, but always trying to keep our goals clear and a strategy to know what kind of needs should we be trying to meet, what kind of changes should we be trying to make. And you've heard me several times and hopefully read some of the stuff that we're putting out. You know, we talk about local sustainability all the time. The churches should be locally supported. We have over 50 churches in Haiti and about 20 schools, and every church and every school is completely locally supported. Our budget for supporting schools and churches in Haiti is 0. We don't spend a dime to keep anything open. Keeping it open depends on the local people and their commitment. And you know, to be honest, if there aren't local people who want to keep something open, maybe it ought to close. But what we want to do is go in where there are committed people who are trying to do a ministry in their community, and we want to give them things to work with. So we build things, we buy equipment, we start businesses, we buy vehicles, we do things like that. Our budget for keeping them operating is still 0, but we give them something to work. We still spend as much as ever. We spend more than ever, but I think we're getting more bang for our buck. We are building things, and I'm going to show you some pictures of those things. Poverty is something that you should always be looking at, not just how can we get these people something to eat, how can we get them these things that they need, but how can we change their situation. Amen? That is so important. Some people are happy to do tourist missions, to go to a place and give out things and get those smiles and that gratitude and come back and talk about how bad the people live there. That's not enough for me. Because when I look at a situation, I don't just want to think, okay, how can I put a smile on these faces? I want to think, what could be established here that would change the situation? Amen? That takes a lot more thinking, and in the long run, a lot more spending. But I think really it's what has to be done, especially in a place where there has been perpetual poverty, generation after generation, and where a lot of the spending has really perpetuated the poverty. And so we need to break those cycles. Goats are a project. Did you know a goat can be, start to say a missionary, not really a missionary. They go into the ministry. Let's put it that way. That's an old line. But the goats are one of our projects, and this is actually that mother goat is one that we bought when she was just a kid. And now she has kids of her own. And we bought 25 goats out on Laganov, and most of them have kids, and we have now expanded in some other parts of Haiti. And so the way they do it, they give the goat to a family and they raise it. And then when it has kids, usually they have 2. One they get to keep as part of their return on their investment. The other one goes back to the church to either be started with a new family, or it can be sold to help support the church or whatever. So that program does keep growing naturally. But if you want to help somebody get their goat sooner, $40 or $50 buys the larger breeds, which is what we're trying to do to get the most return. And there's a lot of families that are really excited to get a goat. It changes their situation. Even more, a motorcycle changes the situation of a pastor, especially if he's ministering in a rural place, and especially if he's ministering to more than one church. And so traveling those mountain roads and those winding trails, motorcycles can make it on most of those. And so it really changes the situation of a pastor to be put on wheels. We have a pastor named Fritz who is way down the south of Haiti. And when he joined us a few years ago, he was told, okay, you're so far from all of our others that your church doesn't really go with any of our districts. But if you'll get 5 churches down there, we'll start a new district. Well, he has 4 now. And he's still the head pastor of all 4 of them, traveling around, although he does have some young guys that are doing some preaching in those places, and he's helping to develop them. Fritz really needs a motorcycle. He's the next one that we would really like to buy one for. We can buy a brand new motorcycle for about $1,000, so that's a pretty good deal. They come from China. This is one of the churches that is being built, and church construction is really important to us. We do a lot of that. Sometimes it's just putting the roof on it after they have invested and worked. Local participation by giving and work is really important to us. If they're not doing anything on it, we're not going to do anything on it. But if they're trying their best to help to build and to help establish something, then we want to come alongside and help them make that happen. I may have showed you this picture last time because we started this project a long time ago. Anybody remember that one? That's the worst looking church building I have ever seen. And as you can see, there's somebody sitting in there in a white shirt at the time of that picture. Well, where would you start to renovate that? Some of you guys do construction. I was doing some renovation yesterday down in Indianapolis before I came up here, but I don't think I would even, I mean, you just would clear it, right? And that's what we did. They bought property in another place, and work started up there at a place called St. Michel, and we are done. As a mission, we're done with it. They will continue to work on it and finish out the inside, but that's the building that is there now instead of the other one that a strong wind would probably have blown down. Church at Pecos, another one that was very old and starting to deteriorate, and this building is going up in its place up at Pecos. And so God is helping us. Sometimes we have to buy a place because there's not a place to build. And this one, if you remember from our paper, we ran this several times, raising money to buy this. This is in Santo Domingo. And we were able to buy that a few months ago, and ever since then they have been building and expanding. We give a little bit towards that, but they've been putting more into it beyond that. And this next picture is the same place, but it's hard to recognize it as the same place. So let me back up again. Look at that. See the big sidewalk in front, and then there's a little slope, and then another sidewalk, and then the street. And what they did is on the second level, they brought that straight out over the big sidewalk that was low there in front, and now they have steps that come down to the sidewalk out by the street. And so then they will take out that front wall that's behind those new blocks and bring the roof out, and so they will expand the church considerably. And they took out partitions, and this is one of the places that they were meeting. They were renting part of the building, other people rented other parts. Now that we own it, they've opened it up, and they're doing a lot with it. And this was the crowd on Easter Sunday morning, about 300 people packed in and out around it, looking in the windows. That's not their normal crowd, but Easter Sunday crowd. It was pretty neat to have that kind of a turnout. The church at Kafu, they've been asking for a long time to help us renovate their church, but they've been there a long time. They wanted to build new out around it. And I told them, look, if you've been there for so long and you've got a strong church, you're better off than most of our churches. Why aren't your people contributing and helping make this happen? And they finally, tired of waiting on us, they actually started without money from us. Isn't that great? We don't do it that way on purpose, but sometimes it can happen that way. And this is the new structure that's going up out around the old one, new foundation, because they made it higher. And then they're going to take the walls up higher than they were before. Eventually they'll tear out that old building in the middle and building around. Now we are probably going to have to help them by the time it's done, maybe to put the roof on or something. But I was excited that they made a start. And local people feel like it is their church and they're putting what they ought to into it. Pastors' Convention every year, usually just a couple weeks before Christmas. And so when I go, I get to enjoy some hot weather right in December and miss a little bit of the Christmas rush. It's almost hard to imagine when I'm down there that it's almost Christmas, you know, that back here there are decorations hanging and maybe snow on the ground. But one of the things we have gotten to do the last couple conventions is to introduce new courses from SGC. We have 5 now translated into French, which is the language they use in Haiti, and also explained to them how we do the projects. I have a young man named Wycliffe Mozart that, so that's quite a name in it. Think about that, Wycliffe Mozart, a reformer and a classical musician put together there. I don't know which direction he himself goes, but he's one of the orphans that was raised by the mission and is now in the university. We're helping put him through. But I send him out to get information on these projects. And so he'll travel out, get the pictures of the church, get all the information, talk to the pastors, get pictures of the family and all that. And then we print that in the reporter. And then if the money comes in, God touches the hearts of some people to give towards that. Then we do the project, and then I send Wycliffe out there again to get pictures following up. And so sometimes we print these before and after pictures in the paper. And so hopefully you're following some of that. But that's the process, and I wanted them to understand what it takes. Now, the training, we're trying to get it established and get it spread throughout the country, not just for our churches in Haiti, but for all of them that are interested. And so we've rented this place, a little building that will be a bookstore and also a center for printing and keeping the courses available. We bought this printing machine, and it was pretty expensive, but it can do high volume. And so we are printing the courses ourselves now in Haiti in French rather than having to print them in the U.S. and take them down. And we also have a bookmobile. Isn't that cool? It's kind of like a pickup bed on the back of a motorcycle. And I rode in it when I was down there last time, and it apparently doesn't have any shocks in that back part. You feel every little thump going down those roads. But what they do, they take this out to other conventions and seminars and meetings of organizations that are besides ours. They go out and introduce the courses and the books to others and help get them started. They go visit churches and promote these courses. So the bookmobile was pretty good. Once you start having lots and lots of different books available, somebody can't carry them in a backpack to go out somewhere. So books are heavy. You've probably noticed that. So let's talk about something on the other side of the world, about as different as you can get. In Eastern Europe, Ukraine, where I lived for a few years, Ukraine is still in war, civil war with Russian involvement. And I can tell you they appreciate Trump a lot more than they did Obama with the kind of help that they are getting. And when I was there during the Obama administration, I had to apologize for America's apparent lack of interest in their conflict that was going on. Things are a little better now, but the war is still going on. Thousands have been killed. I have stood by a cemetery with thousands of graves that have just been put there the last few years from soldiers who have died in this conflict. And so when it first started, it was big in the news for a while. It's not mentioned that much anymore, but many are homeless, many are refugees from that area. We went over this bridge recently when I was there a few months ago, and I almost wondered if we should send the van over before and walk over, but we made it. And we passed a little place where had been a battle. Here were a couple apartment buildings that were all blasted out, and I wanted to get out there and look for souvenirs, maybe some cartridge casings or grenade piece or something like that. But they said, no, you can't go out there because when the soldiers were entrenched out there, they put mines in the ground in case the enemy charged them, and some of those are still there. So I resisted my inclination to souvenir hunt in the former battlefield. A little too recent battlefield. You don't have to worry about that on our Civil War battlefields, but over there it can happen. Religion is a little bit formal and very elaborate. And you might want to consider, especially with you guys being online and who knows who all's watching all over the world, if you could get an outfit like this. These guys with those blue robes for Brother Fry and maybe Brother Campbell and, I don't know who else, maybe Brother Davis for sure. Get him one of those. Wouldn't he look great in that? You would be the only church that I know of in the holiness movement that would have anything like that. So these people that are sitting at home deciding which one to tune into, you would get them. Now, one thing you'd miss, as you see in this next one, if you really wanted to go Orthodox style of worship, no pews. I don't know if anybody here has trouble staying awake, but that would take care of it. If you came in here and it was just open, no pews. Aren't you glad we're good Bible-believing evangelicals who can sit down for church instead of that kind of style? Now, the churches that are our own, that we are responsible for, are just a few in Ukraine. We have this one in Kniazychi, and this one down in Nova Odessa, where Andre pastors. But the biggest thing that we have going on in Haiti is the training program with the courses, and we are involved with hundreds of churches with that. We have a representative that travels full-time, works for us to spread the courses, Brother Andre Dutsenko. He has 2 children, and they're expecting another. And you may remember back a couple years ago, we helped him plant a church, and that church is still going. But now he travels for us full-time, doing training and showing the courses, and they're going all kinds of places. And hundreds of people are trained every year through the training center in Cherkasy. We print the courses right there in Ukraine. We print them 1,000 at a time. And most of these that we've printed are out. We don't have boxes of these sitting around. They go pretty rapidly. And so thousands of them are in use already. There's a chaplains organization in Ukraine that works with the Army and with other government organizations. And the SGC training in Russian is the official training that they use for that chaplains organization, about 400 chaplains that are in that. So it's having an influence beyond what we can ever measure. We just, every once in a while, we hear of people, we just recently heard of Ukrainians in Poland that are using the courses, and I don't know where they got them, but that's exciting. Now, for people who like budgets and numbers, this is where we're at. We're actually a little farther along than what these numbers show right now. And if I had done this calculation at the beginning, maybe I'd have been a little nervous about biting this off. But 6 courses that have been translated and 1,000 printed. I think that's actually should be 8 now instead of 6. And then more courses that are translated but not yet printed in large quantities. And then others still a few yet to be translated. So we're moving through that process. We have a translator that's working full-time. We have an editor that works full-time for us. Besides the printer that doesn't work full-time for us, but he prints for us there. And the training center, we really have a great team. Some of these are people that I've known since we lived there. I've known some of these people for 20 years. Some of them were my students back then, and they travel for us there now. And so God has really given us a great team. Now think about this. When this is done, this is a lot of money. Some of that money will come back because we are selling the courses. Now, when we do it through the training ministry, we subsidize that. We don't get all that money back that was printed because we're helping them be able to do that training. But when our representative travels around and sells the courses, he sells them a little above cost. That helps cover his travel. So some of this money may come back, so we may not have to actually raise $42,500 to finish this. But think about what will have been accomplished by the time this is done. 20,000 ministry training courses in use in the country of Ukraine. And even if we never did anything else, we would know that that would probably continue to spread and continue to have impact there. And so I think this is a great investment. If you're looking for something for long-term, eternal investment that you may not know the full results of till you get to heaven, I don't think you could find something better. Now, getting it into a language is quite a challenge. It's expensive. It's a lot of work. Making sure that it's checked and double-checked and make sure you've got a perfectionist who is going over it that last time before it goes to the printer and all that. But God has really given us great people for that. And so sometime back I began to think, well, you know, we're getting it into Russian. It's not just Ukraine that speaks Russian. Why, since we're already doing the hard and expensive part of getting it into the language, why not start finding other places in other countries that would do what our training center in Cherkasy is doing? And so we began to follow up, look for contacts, and of course Russia is the largest Russian-speaking country, but there are others as well. And a few months ago, we were in the little country of Belarus, and we met with the leaders of their association of churches, over 200 churches, and a seminary and a printing ministry. And 4 of those guys that are on the right came from Russia to meet with us in that meeting, and we showed them the courses. And since then, we have been getting the plan together. We've printed a brochure that has endorsements from their own leaders, and that brochure is going to go to all of their churches. And then Andre will be traveling to Belarus to do training. For anybody who is interested in getting the courses started, we're going to print them there. And so we are up and rolling in Belarus. And so I'm excited about what's happening there. And so then we began to look in other places. And one was Kazakhstan. I don't know if you ever heard of Kazakhstan. This is an Asian country. It was dominated by the Soviets. And so they actually speak Russian because of that. They look like Asians, as you can see the people there, and it was a little bit strange to me to hear these people that look like Asians speaking Russian, you know. And there are people who look like Russians there too, because Russia was involved with them for a long time, but they're mostly Asian ethnically. We stayed in this little city, and that's a view from the window of our apartment. Once you get out of that, it's mostly desert and pretty desolate. Kazakhstan is large geographically, but not large with their population. But we got to meet some really great people, and making the right contacts is really important because we were looking for people who have a passion for ministry training. You know, you can always find somebody to hire to do whatever you want, but we weren't just looking for somebody to hire. We wanted people who already are trying to do ministry training. That's their passion. That's what they want to do, so that when they see these courses and look through them, they're going to say, wow, this is just what we need. Okay, that's what I'm looking for, and sometimes you get that and sometimes you don't, but we got that a lot in Kazakhstan as we met with a lot of different pastors, and our main meeting was in the capital with a group that represented 21 pastors that came together. And it's interesting how in these cultures, in these countries where they are persecuted, and they are in Kazakhstan, and there are a lot of restrictions. By the way, I was a criminal for about 2 weeks over there, breaking the law every time I turned around. I haven't had that thrill very many places, even in Ukraine. Ukraine is wide open as far as religious freedom. Kazakhstan is not. And I found out that every time I handed somebody a course to look at, I was breaking the law, because you're not allowed to promote religious material that has not been approved by the government. And so I was not really in danger. They could have been in danger if something had happened. But Mark Sankey traveled with me, sponsored by IHC, for that little tour. And we really made some great contacts with people that, one was the head of the Bible League, that they do a little bit of evangelism training. They've been in over 100 churches in that country. Basically, we met the people who know everybody. We got with the people who know all of the evangelical churches in the country. And so they will help, once we get this printing, get this going. There's some hoops to get through to get that to happen. But then we won't have to be over there traveling around showing these to people. We've met the people who know everybody. And so that was pretty exciting. We sat down with a group of people who are working on starting a college, a Bible college. And it will be the only Bible college that exists in the country. There isn't one now, but they are working with one, and they have worked with government officials who say they would actually give approval for this to happen. And they're interested in using the courses for that. So all kinds of doors that are potentially open in Kazakhstan. Then we traveled down to the little country south of Kazakhstan, another one you may never have heard of, which is Kyrgyzstan. And they also mostly speak Russian. There is a Kyrgyz language that some of them speak as well. And we traveled and we met with lots of little groups and represented the courses to these pastors. And it was everything we could have hoped for as far as their reactions and their responses as they would leaf through these and say, this is just what we need. I remember one pastor, he said, we work here in the city, but we have a ministry in about 5 different villages. We go out, we're starting home groups, we're doing evangelism out there, and we're training people to lead those groups. And if they had these, they would be instantly equipped, basically, to lead those groups. They would have something to teach. And so we're working on, we got printing prices actually just today. One of the texts that I got as I was sitting waiting for the pork chops to be ready, I got texts from Kumbat Edunikova, I'm not saying that exactly right, who is probably going to be our coordinator in Kyrgyzstan. And she got prices. We can print them for about $2.80, under $3 a piece. Nice, colorful covers. Print them there, and she will make them available in that country. We preached in a church and broke the law when we did that, because you're not supposed to preach in a church in Kyrgyzstan without having government permission, which is really hard to get. But this was another church that we met with, and the one on the left is Kumbat. And she is probably going to be the one that helps us promote and circulate the courses in that country. So these are some of the things that are going on around the world, doors that are opening. And while we were there, we met with representatives from Moldova. And since then, courses have been sent to Moldova for them to get started. And again, it was a Bible League leader who has a list of like 100 churches that he works with. And he's going to make these courses available there. And so we've had a representative take them to Bulgaria and represent them there at a convention where people had come from all over. I started to say Europe, but I think it's beyond that, because they wanted to have copies of what we have in Chinese as well there to show. And so that was where they met the Moldovan guy who contacted us later and traveled up to Cherkasy to meet with us. And so these doors are opening. Can I say we've got training centers running in all these places up and organized? No, they're open doors at this point, but God is helping. And we have really, I feel like our main prayer that we had, that we would meet the right people, I feel like that prayer was answered. We met the right people when we went to those places. And so I came away excited and happy, and we're keeping up the contact with them and getting those plans in motion. These are some of the opportunities that we've talked about tonight. Everything from buying a goat to helping Andre get a computer, or putting a roof on a church, different things that you can do, whatever it is that strikes you, large or small. And I would just ask that you do whatever God lays on your heart. And to me, it's exciting, the style that we have of our spending, because our actual budget for operation is pretty small. And so most of what we raise can go towards doing specific things. We can accomplish things, we can build things, and you can even get a picture of it. Now, if you buy a goat, I can't promise you that it will be named after you, or that we can get a picture of that specific goat. We may not know which one your money bought. I can get you a picture of a goat, but it may not be the exact same one. But if you help put a roof on a place or something like that, we can get you pictures of that actual place. So it's a joy to share with you tonight. And I'm going to turn the service back over to the pastor.